What's up, boys? UFC Saudi Arabia has just wrapped up as Nassourdine Imavov found a knockout victory against Israel Adesanya. And in this video, we're going to matchmake for the top tier of the middleweight division. So starting with this upcoming fight next weekend, we have Dricus Du Plessis versus Strickland. Now, this is definitely going to be a very interesting matchup. This is the second fight between the two. The first fight was razor close as Dricus was able to eke out a decision victory in that matchup. And going into this fight the second time, a lot of people think Strickland may win. A lot of people think Dricus is going to win. But in my opinion, I think Dricus is going to win once again, and I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if he's able to find a finish. Because when you talk about a guy in Strickland, obviously he's very defensively sound. We saw that extensively in their first fight between these two guys. We've also seen it extensively throughout Strickland's career, but I do think Strickland is a little bit awkward. And I think when you fight guys similar to that, some awkward styles, they get easier as you fight them more. And I do think Dricus is going to be able to figure out Strickland a little bit more in this next matchup than he was able to the first time. Even in the first fight, as the rounds were progressing, you saw Dricus get closer and closer to those big wild overhands that he was throwing. He was also having a lot more success as the fight did progress. And overall, I do think we're going to see a little bit of a carryover effect into this next matchup between these two guys. And as I said before, I wouldn't be surprised if Dricus is able to catch Strickland and possibly even finish him. Now, obviously, the same could be said for Strickland for Dricus, as Dricus also has a very unique style, and maybe fighting a guy like that a second time could give you some reads and could make it a little bit easier to land shots on him, which of course is true. But I don't necessarily think Strickland is going to be able to make Dricus pay, as obviously Dricus has a great chin, he's extremely physical, and Strickland isn't known as a guy that hits all that hard. Outside of dropping Israel Adesanya, we haven't really seen too much power from Sean Strickland, and based upon the fact that Dricus does have a tremendous chin, I don't really think that Dricus is going to be the guy we see Strickland knock out or hurt significantly. So I definitely am going with Dricus Du Plessis to beat Sean Strickland this upcoming weekend. Now, assuming that does happen, then the next fight that has to happen is Dricus Du Plessis versus Khamzat Chimaev, and this is definitely a very interesting fight, a fight that a lot of people think Khamzat Chimaev is going to win, but in my opinion, I kind of see this as a 50-50, maybe a 60-40 matchup in the favor of Khamzat, but I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if Dricus did win this. Because when you talk about Khamzat, obviously he's a first-round fighter, he finishes essentially everybody, his wrestling is just bar none, he's a tremendous wrestler. Everybody in the UFC has trouble with it. Even Robert Whittaker, who's a guy who's notoriously known as an anti-wrestler, wasn't able to deal with the incredible wrestling that Khamzat has. But when you talk about Dricus Du Plessis, if anybody was able to beat Khamzat, I think it would be him. Because Dricus, obviously, he is a little bit clunky on the feet, a little bit wild on the feet, but when you talk about his ground game, he is extremely technical. He does a great job at going for takedowns, and once the fight is on the ground, he is actually a really good wrestler and a really good and has a really good ability to find positions on the ground as well. And I think that fact, alongside with the fact that he's extremely physical, extremely strong, will actually bear pretty well for Dricus in this matchup versus Khamzat. Now, I'm not saying Khamzat's not going to be able to take him down, because I'm sure he will be able to, but I think that strength and athleticism could actually lead Dricus to get back up out of bad positions, even if he does get taken down from Khamzat, or if he is stuck on the ground, I think he'll be able to survive. And as it would be a 5-round title fight, as the rounds do progress, the longer that Dricus is able to survive, the better that it's probably going to get for him, as it seems like Khamzat does gas, at least to an extent. So let's assume for the sake of the video that Dricus does win this fight. Now, I think the number one contenders fight should be Caio versus Nassourdine Imavov. I don't think Imavov should just wait for a title shot. I do think he should fight one more time, and I think Borralho is a perfect matchup for him. And in this matchup, I'm going with Borralho. I do think that Imavov is good, but I don't necessarily think he's as good as some of these other guys at the top of the middleweight division. I think Borralho is just a little bit better on the ground. I think he may even be a little bit better on the feet as well, as crazy as it may sound, as Imavov does have a really nice ability on the feet. He has great hand speed, he has good power, as he's shown against Izzy. But at the end of the day, I just think Borralho is a little bit better. I think he's a little bit more defensively sound. I think he's going to be able to avoid a lot of the shots that Imavov throws his way. And I also think he'll be able to take him down and have a lot of success on the ground as well. But assuming that Borralho does win this matchup, I think the next fight that should be made is Dricus Du Plessis versus Caio Borralho. Now, in this matchup, it's definitely an interesting one. I am very high on both of these guys, both Dricus Du Plessis and Caio Borralho. But at the end of the day, I made a video talking about this, but I think Dricus is going to be a champion for a very long time. I just think his physicality alongside with his versatility makes him essentially unstoppable. Of course, eventually he's going to be able to get caught. Of course, eventually he's going to lose. But at this current moment, I do think he's in his prime. I do think his physicality is bar none. I don't know if anybody in the UFC has a level of physicality that this guy does have. He takes shots at will. It doesn't seem to affect him. And he only needs to land 1 or 2 shots on his opponent to completely change the fight, as we saw in the Israel Adesanya matchup. So in this fight between Borralho and Dricus, I am going with Dricus Du Plessis once again. I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if he's losing the fight till he isn't and he's able to find a finish on Borralho. It seems like Dricus just finds out ways to do that. But one thing that I will say is I actually do think that Borralho is one of the tougher matchups for Dricus. But of course, at the end of the day, I am leaning with Dricus Du Plessis in this matchup. Now, I will say one thing that I want to touch upon is if Dricus Du Plessis does beat Strickland this upcoming weekend, and he also beats Khamzat Chimaev. At that point, the UFC, I'm sure, will give him all the leeway he wants, and if he wants to move up to 205 to fight Alex Pereira, if he's still the champ, or fight somebody else at 205, I'm sure the UFC would let him, and obviously it would be warranted. He would have a nice couple of wins under his belt, a couple of title defenses, and I wouldn't be mad at that whatsoever. But assuming he doesn't move up, I think Borralho probably would be the next matchup at that point. And as I said, I am leaning with Dricus Du Plessis. Now, for Israel Adesanya, this is an interesting one. Obviously, I don't think he's washed. A lot of people do think he's washed, that he got knocked out, he lost a couple fights in a row. I don't necessarily think so, and I'm definitely not on the same boat as most other people. In this, when you look at his 2 most recent matchups against Dricus and against Imavov, he was having a lot of success against both guys until he wasn't. In the Dricus fight, it was a relatively close fight. Both guys were having their moments, but Izzy was doing a really nice job at throwing shots to the body, throwing leg kicks, frustrating Dricus a little bit, but eventually he was able to get caught, taken down, and finished. And a similar thing happened in his fight against Imavov. In that first round, I thought Izzy looked great, to be honest. He was doing a great job at throwing leg kicks, head kicks, body kicks. He was finding his range for the most part, and it's just in the second round, he made a defensive mistake, he got caught, and he got finished. Now, maybe when people say that Izzy's washed, what they mean is he's not able to take shots like he was able to in the past, which I would agree. Also, maybe his reaction time is not as good as it was in the past, which I would definitely agree with as well. But in terms of overall skill and ability to win fights, I don't necessarily think he's washed. When I talk about washed fighters, I'm talking about guys who wouldn't be able to beat anybody in the top 5 or even the top 8. And I don't see Israel Adesanya as that guy. I think he just went up against some really good guys and lost and got chinned. And I do believe, obviously this is very easy to say, but I do believe if he was able to avoid a lot of the big shots coming his way, I think he would have been able to beat Imavov. But obviously, who knows? That fight was just getting started, and he ended up getting caught and finished. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the little breakdown of the rankings for the top half of the middleweight division. Let me know if you guys agree, if you don't agree, if you have any other fights you would like to see. And anyways, until the next time, peace out, guys.